First item, this is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any presentations made to the board. Presentations are limited to matters over which the board has authority. Speakers have up to 4 minutes or the time limit determined by the presiding officer. Each speaker must complete the speaker's form that includes the topics to be presented. Did anyone sign up to speak?
Would you rather speak on the item?
Is this a specific item?
Yeah, it's on the.
Okay.
Yep.
So we have no other speakers at this particular point in time? Okay, we'll move into the agenda item number 1. Conduct a public hearing to consider a rezoning request made by B&S Southern Sign and Crane Service to amend Planned Development District 13, PD 13, Tract 4A to accommodate signage. The subject property is legally described as the Village at Trophy Club, Lot 4, approximately 1 acre, Denton County, Texas, and is generally located at the northwest corner of Trophy Club Drive and State Highway 114. The property is addressed as 95 Trophy Club Drive. Okay, it is 7:01. We're opening the public hearing. Staff report first.
All right. Okay. The property is the bank. They're located there at 114 in Trophy Club Drive. I can give you all kind of the Cliff Note version of this. It's a PD, so we've got to amend the PD on the way that it's written. They did an expansion and a remodel, re-roof. You notice that the old bank had the 3 gables. Those 3 gables were removed. They've got a really nice, open, large entry now. So the existing sign that was on the south side, which was the only place allowed at the time when the PD was done, they were not allowed to put one on the front. It was only on the south side. Another sign's going back in that same existing. So they removed it, added on, and then they'd like to put the new sign back up. On the front, they'd like to add a second sign. So it's not allowed. And so they're asking that to be amended and add a new sign on the front. And then the monument sign, the only thing that they'd like to change just for energy purposes is at some point remove the fluorescence and then have the LED put in. I can go through the specifics on the sizing. Very similar to what was existing on the south side, and on the front, it's a slightly larger just for that front entry. That is pretty much what they are asking for. Got any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
Do you know what the size of the sign actually is? You mentioned the same size and then a larger sign, but do we know what size it is?
Yeah, okay. Let me go to. Right here. So we've got the existing PD standards and then the proposed. And you've got the proposed dimensions there. So on the south elevation, originally was 22 high, 188 inches long. And the new one will be 17 high. And it actually, the way that the new sign company, they actually did it a little bit different, but it's 60 by 156. And then the new wall sign is 20 and a half. The letter height, 74 by 186. So very similar to the south elevation.
Okay, thank you.
I think by just with the naked eye, it'd be very difficult to see the difference between the two.
So the original sign on the south wall, they're just putting it back up on the new
Yes, sir.
extension.
It's going to be a brand new sign.
But it's the same dimensions?
Slightly. On the south side, it is, it's actually smaller on the south side.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Anyone else want to speak on this? Yes, sir?
Yeah, what's the rationale for two signs? They had one before, and now they want two.
Well,
What's the rationale?
after, when I first was proposed, I was wondering what the rationale was, as them only allowed to put a sign on the south side, not facing Trophy Club Drive where people could see. So I think that's the rationale, is they'd like a little more, this is our bank here.
Okay, but the ordinance or the requirements for the signs for PD 13 is one on the building and the monument sign out front, correct?
That's correct. One on the south side, this particular track was specific and said on the south side of the building. Not just one on the building, it said south side.
Okay, but now they want to put one on both sides,
They want to put one on the front,
and the south side.
and the existing, yes.
Yeah. And again, why do they want to do that? What is their, they have the monument sign out front, as you're traveling on Trophy Club Drive. You see the monument sign just fine.
Yeah.
Find the bank. Why two?
It was part of their remodel.
Is the applicant here that they can answer that question?
No, the bank's not here.
One question, the south side facing sign, when that was constructed, the building was constructed, Meet You Anywhere was not there, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, you know,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So the south side, that's what I was thinking, the south side, you can't see that thing anyway unless you're in the parking lot, so why do you want it there? So if they had asked to change it from the south side to the east side, I understand. But asking to put both of them up there, and the ordinance really wants one on the building, that I don't understand.
Melanie?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chairman and commissioners, you're right, they're not here to speak and tell us, but we do feel like it's for more visibility. There are a lot of trees along Trophy Club Drive. There's a berm. It's hard to see the monument sign. And when you are at 114 and Trophy Club Drive, it's an opportunity for more visibility. So I think that's the reasoning.
Okay.
It's business friendly.
Excuse me. Okay.
Business friendly.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
If this heat gets up, there won't be any trees to block the signs. Any other comments or questions, staff?
I do have one question, and it's not related specifically to this case, so I'm not going to take us too far down the rabbit hole, but we've had several times the size of signage come up, and what do we want to arrive at as far as the town on having some sort of prescriptive guidance that would maybe help inform what the sizing should be? And this is just another example. I think it'd be great if we had some sort of rule of thumb, so just mentioning it again, that I think there were some standards or something that we could go by or even have as a reference point. I think it'd be good, because to be honest with you, looking at this and seeing, okay, great that the sizing dimensions they've offered here aren't going to change too much from what was previously there, at least on the south side of the building. That's good. It's good to see that they're kind of following, I guess, what was previously accepted. But for new signage, right, I mean, I think even in the previous meeting, we kind of engaged in this dialogue again, and maybe a couple times before that. So it seems like there's a recurring trend where we know there's going to be folks coming in, there's going to be some revitalization efforts that are occurring. Signage is going to be a part of that. I think it's just something that we need to revisit and put some thought into. So just putting that request out there again, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
One other clarification, this is in a PD and we're amending the PD. How many other structures are in that PD that could come back and say, hey, you changed their sign, I want to change my sign?
This is specific to that tract.
Just that track,
Yes, sir.
okay? Any other questions? Motions?
I'll make a motion to amend the PD 13 to allow for the additional signage on the front elevation and to increase the signage on the south elevation and to allow LED lighting in the existing monument sign.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? Call the point. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Did you close the public hearing?
I did not. Close the public hearing at, let's back it up to 7:09, 7:09,
Okay.
before the vote, sorry.
Yeah, okay, now you're up.
Item B.
Item B.
I move to approve the subject request to allow the sign on the east side. Where did it go on there?
I think he's on his laptop. I don't have control of yours, do I?
Yes.
It's item B. I'm on the wrong way.
To amend the PD 13 to accommodate signs, including the new sign on the east side, the lighting in the monument sign, and in effect, to allow the second signage.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Call the point. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next agenda item, case number SZ 23001, Triple Count Estates rezoning. Conduct a public hearing to consider a rezoning request made by Vasquez Engineering LLC to change the zoning from R15 Single Family Residential District to R12 Single Family Residential District on approximately 2.991 acres of land out of the Mary Medlin Survey Abstract Number 832, Denton County, Texas. The property is generally located south of Trophy Park, west of Balmora Drive, and east of Annandale Drive within the Town of Trophy Club. The property is currently addressed as 2304 Trophy Park Drive. Open the public hearing at 7:12 p.m.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. So this property is one of your few remaining undeveloped tracts. The property is currently zoned R15, and the applicant's requesting R12 zoning. The applicant had submitted a preliminary plat a couple of months ago, and it was determined that 3 of the lots didn't meet the R15 zoning requirements for the square footage. It met all of the setback requirements, and so they chose to submit the R12 zoning so that they can continue to move forward. They had already prepared full engineering construction plans. It's very costly to go back and change those to meet the R15 standards for grading all your side yards, your pad, what you determine for your pads and elevations. So that's what this is. It is a straight zoning case. Some of your other properties that are straight zoned would be all of the old gas well sites, and those range from 12 and 15. And then, a couple of them were townhomes or rezoned to townhomes. So this is a quick summary of the R12 development regulations, and the applicant has received this information through reviews for the rezoning as well as the platting. And then to touch on the surrounding zoning to determine if the R12 zoning is an appropriate category for this property. To the west, you have zoning for a lot type 5 in that planned development, and it's around a minimum of 5,250 square feet, and the minimum dimensions allowed are 50 by 105. And then to the north, the same with PD 27, it's an 8,400 square foot minimum. And it's important to note that, say, the lots immediately to the west, there are about 6 lots, and they range anywhere from 5,458 square feet to 11,970 square feet. And then the properties, as I said, to the north, they're platted at 8,750. The property to the east is zoned R15, and they are proposing 6 lots, and the average lot size is 16,984 square feet. All of this information is in your packets. The public hearing notifications were provided as required, and I think at this time, staff hadn't received any letters in support or in opposition to the request, and staff recommends it for approval. It's an appropriate zoning category for this property and the location. Be happy to answer any questions.
So in the packet, it shows that lots 2, 3, and 4 were actually 13.8, basically.
Yes, sir.
So those were the 3 that were below the 15.
Yes, sir.
Okay, question number 1, the remainder of this tract next door, it's not developed. Will this, it stays R15, is that correct?
Yes, sir. The tract to the east
it's
is a
currently
completely
R15.
separate ownership.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have questions for staff? Comments?
Yeah, I have a question on I'm gonna call it the other side of the street. And that, adjacent to the open lot. As far as access to the street that's gonna be put in, those owners of that land have access to it.
Yes, sir. The right-of-way is placed right along the eastern property boundary that runs north-south. There is not what we call a spite strip in there that would prohibit someone from accessing Triple Crown Drive. That's the proposed north-south street in this development. So the lots to the east, they could front or side onto Triple Crown. We don't have a plan at this time of how that property is going to be designed. We've seen a number of things, talked to a number of people, but nothing has come forward.
Okay, I noticed that in the packet, we were talking about the fact that the idea is to have that little grouping be pretty much, I'm going to, its own development, its own place, and that they're not looking for a lot of traffic coming through and all that. But as far as what happens in the adjacent lot, I mean, it is possible, right, for the people who own that land to put a street in off of Triple Crown and access some part of that land that way.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's what I just wanted to know how that was all could happen in the future. Because I noticed when I was out there, I think it was Berkshire Hathaway has a sign up in front of that open area. And I don't think they're a legal firm. I think they're real estate. And so something I think is going to happen down the road. And I just want to make sure that there's access and that they can use that.
Yes, sir. They'll have access to Triple Crown, and also to Trophy Park Drive.
Okay.
And before I forget, it is a public hearing, and I would like you to know that the applicant's here this evening if you have any questions for them on the zoning or the next agenda item too.
Okay.
Do you have a presentation?
No, but I just want to clarify a couple items
Okay.
and stuff. So, good evening, Chairman Commissioners. My name is Juan Vasquez with Vasquez Engineering, 1919 South Shallow Road, Garland, Texas, 75042. The first question, the reason for the R12 to R15, we're not gaining any lots. Whether it's R12 or R15, you have a total of 6 lots. That's all you can have. Since we have a cul-de-sac, as you know how cul-de-sacs work, the last 2 lots are always odd shaped and stuff. So we wanted to try to make one of the lots where they're all more uniform in size, and that's the reason for the rezone. We're still maintaining the minimum lot depths, widths, setbacks, everything for R15. And as you can see, the lots They're not 12,000, they're 13,000 square feet. In a lot of cities here in the Metroplex, when they have their zoning for R10, R15, it's typically an average where you have some lots that are less, some are more. This ordinance is straight 15,000 and stuff. So in order to make the lots all uniform as much as possible, that's the reason for the request. As far as the neighbor, we've been working on this property for almost a year. Nathan Jepson, who's a resident of Trophy Club and is the owner developer, we've approached the neighbors, we've met with them, and Nathan tried to buy the property, didn't, said no. So we're to the point where has his property for over a year. It's just sitting there. He's got to move on it. He's going to build one of his houses on there, one of his personal houses. So he's invested in the property, and so really can't wait any longer. So we'd like to go ahead and move forward. And yes, the way the right of way is, it's a public right of way. They have access to it if they ever develop in the future. Any other questions you may have?
Questions for the applicant?
I'm kind of curious about, I see this as, like staff said, this is one of the last remaining undeveloped lots in Trophy Club. And so in some instances, there's some opportunities available here. And I'm kind of thinking about infrastructure-wise, maybe what you all have considered. And I live right around the corner from here, so I drive by the lot every single day when I have to take my kids to school or go to the grocery store, different things like that. So I'm actually very interested in what the appearance is going to be of this development in the community, but as well as thinking about the folks moving in here. What have you all had any conversations with kind of the power company and looking at basically the weather that we have come through here? I know at least where I live, we have underground, or we take advantage of kind of underground utilities for the most part. What have you all contemplated for this development?
So we have power lines along the side, which is the long run, and then we also have power lines along the front. And as you may know, putting those power lines on the ground is very, very expensive, because you have power, you also have telephone hanging there. So we're already taking the cost to put the power lines along Trophy Park. Those are going to go underground. The long run along the side, that is a very long run, and, that could be upwards of 100,000 or so to put those on the ground. And so being a small development with 6 lots, it's not really that feasible. I'll let, Nathan here address that if he's, spoken to them as well. But that's our position right now is, just to leave them there.
I have a follow-up question for staff on that particular item. To what degree does the town have a say over power above ground versus buried? I mean, I'm pretty positive it's not necessarily a zoning issue, but I'm just curious because, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's very few above ground power lines in Trophy Club, which is great.
Right.
It's one of the reasons I like living here. But I'm just curious, like, what are your all's levers you pull or do not pull in that regard?
So when the first question came up is, and it's a role that I play a lot, is whether it's with contractors or whatever, is you shall do this or it's okay. And so we either go straight to the code, straight to the ordinances, state law cases, whatever. Our ordinance does require underground burial of electrical and telephones and whatever, but they have a specific phrase and it says nominal voltage. So then you go back and you look at our definitions, we don't have a definition of nominal voltage. So we reached out to Encore. Encore's definition, along with most electricians, they say nominal voltage is your 120 and 240. That's what's typically going to residential homes. So on Monday, I reached out to our Encore rep, and she did verbalize back that those are feeder lines. And so, but she didn't have a specific voltage on what those are. One of the people that would like to speak, they did say that they knew that those were 1400 plus voltage, which if that's the case, I don't have that in writing from Encore yet, but they said if that's the case, that's what those are on feeder, then that wouldn't fall under the category for me to be able to tell the applicant, you shall do this, because our ordinance basically says if it's at nominal voltage. I do know that right across the street or over here by the water tower, that's where those end up, or you could say it the other way around, that's where they come from. So they run up T.W. King and cut across the mud and then up north through there, so
They cut across that environmentally sensitive area.
they do.
Thanks, Matt. Those feeder lines through that highly sensitive, environmentally sensitive area. Yeah,
Yes.
that we talk about a lot. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate the clarification.
Would this be appropriate time for the people who requested? Is it Mr. Butler to speak related to power lines?
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm Jason Butler. I live in 2916 Nottingham Court, so I'm one of the properties that's just to the west there. And so I've lived here about 4 years. I lived here with my wife, my one-year-old son, and I'm here to talk just about the high voltage lines because it's something that I kind of overlooked when I originally bought the property. And as I've learned a little bit more, they've given me a little bit of pause and a little bit of worry about just using my property in general. I work at Schwab. I'm not an electrician. I've had my electrician come out and put the voltage reader in my bedroom, and his jaw dropped. I'm afraid to use my backyard. This isn't about aesthetics, it's about safety. They've relocated the lines. The lines originally the pole ran on an angle like this. I've been in communication with Encore numerous times. I've got numerous pieces of correspondence I can show you. They fixed the line. They put a new pole nice and straight. Sounds good, right? It's now hanging over my property. I have a hot tub, I have a dog, I have a child. I understand it costs money. I've gotten the quote. It's $85,000. Probably all in with everything, it's probably $100,000. Frankly, I'm for the development. I'm tired of seeing the mounds of dirt. I'm tired of seeing the old ranch dilapidating behind me. I'm not here to speak to you against the zoning. I'm here to ask you to make it a condition upon the approval. You've got a bunch of people, you've got children, you've got families. If you came into my backyard, you'd be shocked how close these lines are. I understand that it's not the city's job to come in and say, hey, we can make you do it. I get it. But I'm asking for a bit of human compassion. I'm asking for you guys to at least think about it. Come and take a look. Would you be comfortable? It's not just aesthetically unpleasing. Frankly, I don't think it's safe. So that's all I'm really asking for you guys to think about. Again, the development can get done. I'm happy about it. I want to see growth in this community. I live, work, and play here. I want to stay here. My in-laws live 2 blocks away. I want my future to be here. But I want those lines down. That's the other, a little history as well. Scorberg, as you guys know, was going to develop this parcel 4 or 5 years ago. I think Rylan, you were on that. The lots were too small. That's the history behind it. It didn't get done because of economics. I never had to ask Scorberg to bury the lines. They came in, they proactively told us, we'll bury the lines, we'll put up a new fence. So from my position as a homeowner, I look at it and go, where's the city getting my backing here? When the last developer came to me proactively and just said, hey, we'll put a new fence up, we'll bury the lines. We know it's going to be an inconvenience to you that we're developing behind your house. So that's really all I have. I mean, I understand there might not be a mechanism in place, but I really think that with the resources of the city and all parties involved, this can get done.
We also have another speaker on power lines, Carolyn Rosen.
Thank you so much, Council, and thank you for allowing us to hear and visit with each of you. And I will ditto everything. Well, let me first tell you where I live. 2928 Nottingham Court. I'm the very last house on the cul-de-sac. I've lived here for about 5 years. I live here with my husband. My grandchildren visit often. And I am in real estate. I'm the president of Ebby Halliday Realtors. And I want to speak to you about the environmentally responsible thing to do. As someone who loves living in Trophy Club, and we sell it every day, one of the things that we love is not only the aesthetics of the community, but also the way the council and our mayor stands behind the safety of our residents. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about your family living backing up to these power lines that could very easily be buried. At the end of the day, the profitability of the developer and the builders who will build in that community, they will do very well. I'm in real estate, I know the numbers. So I'm just coming to you as a homeowner today and someone who cares about the safety of our families, our children. I don't have any children, but I do at home, but I do have grandchildren who visit often. I'm very close with the residents who do have small children. We care about our community and we care about the safety of those people who live in the community. So I'm just asking you to please, maybe the guidelines don't state that it's required, but please think about it as if you lived in those properties that back to the power lines. So thank you for letting me speak and thank you for what you do.
Anyone else? Additional questions, comments at this particular point in time?
I do have a question. I understand we don't have data. We have the word go off of the gentleman here that came to speak about what they're seeing in their home in terms of the electrical throughput. Said that it was jaw-dropping, I guess, what the measurements were reading. So I guess my question is, do we have any understanding, or maybe the developer can speak to, if the lots adjacent to this property are essentially going to be using the same power source as the homes that you all are having? I'm kind of curious what sort of safeguards might be in place for the new development to prevent any sort of the flow of energy that kind of exceed what you would typically observe in a residential environment.
Interesting question.
Hello, guys. Nate Jepson. I currently live in Churchill Downs next door. Currently have power lines that run in front of our development as well as down the side. I'm actually a licensed electrical contractor by trade. Moved here about 6 years ago, first Abbey Moore, and then ended up in Churchill Downs. Love the area so much. Saw this land. Like Mr. Vasquez said, I'm actively trying to purchase the property adjacent to it. It's caught up in some legal things with their family. So when it comes to the safety, I don't know if there's going to be anybody that will tell you there is a safety issue. Yes, are there 10,000 volts running through that line? Yes. That's what they're designed to do. Does it pose a risk? You'd have to hire someone that's professional. I mean, as being an electrical contractor, there's not a safety issue unless you go up that pole and you touch those live wires. You know, the cost. Yes, if I was a previous developer that looked at this property and I was going for multiple homes, you could absorb that cost and try to absorb it. There's no way to absorb $100,000 into these 6 lots. These homes, I mean, with building costs where they're at, like I said, I'm trying to put my own personal home there, and it doesn't concern me. And I'm at the back, and I have the main lines on my property. Again, we'll absorb the front of the property to get those underground, even though Churchill Downs didn't. I think aesthetically, they need to be done. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What is the price point that you all are looking at for each one of these lots?
The lots are probably going to go between $375,000 and $400,000. The homes are probably going to range anywhere from 1.3 to 1.5.
And you know, not understanding the economics of all that you all are working with the project, but you have essentially 6 lots, and we're talking about $100,000. Simple math, that's less than $20,000 roughly a lot.
When you're working on margins of 10 to 12%, you can't absorb that with carrying costs.
So do you think the people that are coming and they'll be interested in these lots, it seems like there's a belief, at least the way that you all are approaching it, that they're not going to care that those power lines are there?
Currently don't think there's any issue at all. I currently have a spec home right next door to you guys being built as we speak in South Lake that backs right up to the main power grid. If I thought there was gonna be an issue selling that home for $1.7 million, I wouldn't have purchased the lot for $500,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a question. Is it Nathan? Yep. I have a question for you. I understand that high voltage itself is not an issue.
Correct.
But what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an EMF issue that is, I think, what you're referring to as a safety issue. It's electromagnetic force, right? And so you've got a, and that's what he measured in the house. Okay. And so being bombarded with that is the issue, not the fact that it's a 10,000 or 14,000 volt line and someone's going to go touch it. That's not the issue. Can you address the EMF?
I don't have any reports done on any of the study with that.
Okay, I just.
It didn't
I need to
pose a
clarify that.
concern. I mean, I was working with Mr. Butler from the day he saw that I purchased the land. He literally called within a couple weeks. Met him a few times. Great guy. We're from the same home state, grew up in the same town in Chicago. So, but, you know, if, you know, it was originally brought, hey, Nate, if I could rally up my neighbors that back up to this property and get us all to come in and split the cost with you, would you interest? Yes, but what's the probability of going up to a homeowner and saying, hey, we want to rally up $10,000? Is it bugging you that much? You know,
Yeah.
we haven't got to that point.
There's bugging and there's safety. And I know this is it's not a cut and dry issue with EMF. That's right. And, you know, there's people on one side, people on the other side. But I think we need to take some time to address this issue, to investigate it a little bit before we make any decisions tonight.
I would second that as well. It is unfortunately, it's not cut and dry, because you will have a body of people tell you that living under a high volume of EMF has no effect on you, and you have other people that say, oh, it's going to make you sick or do something bad to you. The reality of it is that this is an area, I don't know if any of us on the panel have expertise on EMF. Do any of us have expertise? Nope. Then I would.
I made a B in engineering physics at A&M. Is that?
There you go.
It was a B.
You're qualified.
It was a hard B.
Hard bit.
Wouldn't do it again. Yeah.
But you're not a double E.
No, sir. I changed majors to avoid that. Sorry, just a little levity.
But I mean, but I think the point is, we don't have the knowledge to make decisions or to make recommendations around that.
I know we're not to it yet, but I'm just looking at the plat, trying to find the easement where this line would be.
It's in the, can you hear me? Is this on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair, it's on the plat labeled as a Southwestern Bell easement, and
Telco,
Encore
okay.
shares that easement.
Okay, I was looking for TP&E. You know how the old ones usually say TP&E?
Yes.
Okay.
So they have co-located.
Okay.
And I also wanted to point out that the property, this is zoning, and the power lines is in the subdivision regulations. That's where that requirement. So this has been advertised as a public hearing for straight zoning, not a PD.
Right.
The plan development would have been the way to add things to the development. So as it is now, we cannot add that type of requirement to the zoning. So we are considering zoning. The other item I'd like to point out is, even if the P&Z and council say you must bury them, there's still the element that Encore needs to agree to this too. So I'm just trying to throw out, you know.
We've already crossed that bridge. It is possible throughout Florida, and we can provide documentation that shows that. But look, I don't want to to make this about. Like,
Can you come up and speak, please?
Let me just, so, yeah, I want to be completely clear. This is not an against Nathan thing at all. Like, me and him have had very good dialogue. But let me give you why I initially started having this, like, thought in my head of this whole EMF thing. Frankly, in the past, I thought it was kind of cuckoo, right? I was like, I don't really know anything about it. Sounds kind of crazy, whatever. Me and my wife and I were laying in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning 18 months ago, and her water broke 3 months early. We were in the hospital in the ICU for, call it 3.5 months. I had no idea why that happened. I just happened to kind of go online and do a quick Google search. Now, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an EMF expert, but one of the things that popped up consistently was exposure to electromagnetic waves. It can cause early pregnancy to happen. So that's what spurred this whole thought. That's what made me go get the meter. That's what made me have my electrician come out and take a look. I had 175 volts coming through my bedroom window when I opened the window, when I just opened the curtain. That's not normal. Like, I don't care what resource we derive from, we should find a way to make it happen just to protect the residents, period. It's not about Nathan's, his development. Like I said, I want it to go, but there's got to be a way to make this happen. Thanks.
So let me recap one thing. Ellen Eve said, that's where I was getting ready to go next. We have an issue about rezoning this to comply with the developer's wishes, and then we get into all these other issues when we get to the next item, which is the preliminary plat. And so I think they're clearly two different things. The question is, for everyone, it will force the issue if we approve the rezoning, the change, because then we'll have to directly into the details of the preliminary plat, which is where all this will be dealt with. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Stevens?
Just to make sure I'm clear on this, it is the line is behind the properties on Nottingham and behind the properties on Triple Crown as proposed?
Yes, sir.
That's where it is. So those lines were there when the lots on Nottingham purchased their homes?
Absolutely. And those same lines continue down Trophy Park in front of Churchill Downs, and then also run down the north side of it as well.
But if you look at the photos I provided, the lines are now hanging over my backyard into my property line, which they were not before they moved the pole.
Well, I think we could address that with Encore.
I just need the lines.
Because there are electrical code issues in regards to power lines. There has to be so much of a droop line from a residential.
And the power to the homes, that would be built on Triple Crown?
Yes, that'll be going down.
Where are those lines to be located?
Right down the main drive. We'll have the transformer, and then they'll branch off and feed each of the 6 homes.
So the lines that are under concern are high voltage lines that are not feeding the neighborhoods?
Correct,
They're passing through?
correct. The feeder lines, all of the branch circuits, which would be the common 120, 240, those will all be underground, like for the majority of the homes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm a little confused now. The transformers that feed the homes, are they fed from that overhead line
Yes, the Encore will put in a transformer,
on the pole?
and it will come down and feed another transformer that's underground that will feed all 6 of the homes down the main drive.
Okay, I got it.
But I did meet with Encore out there when I was looking at buying the property. They did tell me, now, it was a young gentleman who came out, but he was telling me the closest pole to Trophy Park, which has the main where it dead ends, and then it goes and feeds Abbey Moore, and then runs down north on Trophy Park Drive. He was saying that pole could not be underground, which didn't make any sense.
So I have one last question. It's actually for staff. So in terms of the zoning considerations right now, after reading through this, I don't see that they're seeking any sort of variance for anything within R12. Is that correct?
Correct. It's, yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a few comments. First one just being, when this property and the adjacent property were brought to P and Z, and then I guess also to council subsequently, in I believe both 2020 and 2021, but they were done so when the two parcels were going to be developed together. And those of you who were around then, at least half of us will recall that in both cases, the requests were denied on the basis of density. I believe 42 lots was the first run, and then the second one was 30-something. I don't remember exactly. Both were significant departures. So from a density perspective, this is, for all practical purposes, no real change density-wise. And I'm happy with the density as it relates to the overall, just, our goals that we've stated over the years and my personal preferences or opinions on how we should go forward. What we have now, and we're seeing it I think it's coming out in this conversation, is what we have now that we're looking at trying to develop just one of the two parcels, and it's a unique shape, is that we're in a situation where we're having to kind of do things weird, right? Like if it was an 8.88 acre development as the other one was, no matter what the density was, there's a better chance that the economics for burying the power line would make more sense, just because of the volume. And I understand that what we're discussing relative to the power line isn't necessarily a zoning issue, but I personally, in whatever capacity I've sat here in the last 8-9 years, want to minimize above-ground power lines because we just should. It's better. And it's a shame that our subdivision regulations aren't tightened up in that regard. And obviously there's a lot of things that are still out there, right? One other thing we know for sure is none of us know the answer truly deep down on what an EMF situation is like. But one thing we do know is that, A, there are regulations in place, and those regulations don't prohibit these lines to be this close to homes. But on the other hand, we also know the people that are in charge of those regulations don't always look out for the individual. I mean, that's just fact. Like, I think we can state both things are true. I say all that just to say that I don't have any issue with the density. I always encourage somebody trying to, develop their property. I just want to make sure that whatever action we take today, we're able to do what we can to see about getting power lines buried, because there are plenty of other good reasons to do it outside of the unknowns that we don't know. So, I guess one of the final question I would have for staff on that is, do we have, in an approval of the preliminary plat coming up later, do we have the ability to impose conditions there that would pertain to that? Because I would assume that would also not be the case, but this is unique. I don't recall talking about something like this before.
You could have a condition that being able to underground that line, and that it be worked out with the developer and Encore. Because I go back to, even if the developer says, okay, we still have to get Encore.
But that would be valid. That would be valid as an annotation on the plat.
It could be a condition that it be investigated. I would not recommend that it say on a condition, it's approved on condition that those lines be put underground.
But even if we could, even if we had Joe Encore standing here telling us thumbs up, you still have a ministerial duty to approve a preliminary plat that conforms to zoning. So we still don't have the ability to impose the condition through the platting process, correct? Okay. So that being said, there have been a number of zoning cases over the years that, even though I agreed with the zoning, I might not agree with the ultimate outcome that approving them would lead towards, and that may be one of those cases. Not sure. We'll have to see how the discussion goes here.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a couple comments. So a couple of things, based on the pictures that we have, I can't tell with the perspective about where the lines run across your backyard. What I will say, there are minimum clearances that are defined in an easement, typically. And so if your backyard extends under or inside the easement, it's encroaching. If it's not, somebody put the wires in the wrong place. And it would make them beholden to move said wires out so that you have the minimum clearances that you have run through there. The lines that you see aren't high voltage lines. They're not 138, 345 kV lines. They're much smaller distribution standard lines. I understand the volts you say that are coming out of there, but they're not considered transmission lines or high voltage lines. They're a distribution line. And they step down anywhere from 138, 64, 28, 14 as it comes into the house and powers it. There are people that do care about that. They are concerned. The sag that you notice typically comes when you have high electricity usage, air conditioning, or on really cold days if you have electric heat. And they come on, those lines are built to have a certain amount of sag in them to keep them from snapping. If they do snap, everybody's in trouble. The other thing that I have, I'm looking at that large cottonwood tree. When the wind blows, how much does that cottonwood tree get into the lines? You know, there's tree trimming. That issue comes back in. How do we do it? Do we flat top it? Do we L it? Do we take it off at the bottom? It's a cottonwood tree. So there's a lot of additional questions that are in there that should be answered for you by somebody from Encore. They really should be.
They refer to them as high voltage lines, just for the record.
Well, yeah, you know, anything above household current is going to be what they call a high voltage line, but trust me, there are high voltage lines, and then there's.
Do you know what the voltage that does run that line?
I'm guessing along there it's probably 64,000, and typically on a distribution line, they'll step down from 64 to 28 to 14 coming on into the house.
24.9.
Yeah, that's a small distribution line. I mean, it's a high voltage, trust me. I know.
It's easy to say when
Yeah.
you're not living underneath it.
Yeah, I know these things. So it's not truly a high voltage line. Your life could be worse. It could be a 138 kV or 345. And the reason it's such a small, what would normally be considered a smaller load on this, it's still got a monopole wood pole. It's got one cross arm, no capacitors, 2 circuits. So it's not typically what you would call a transmission line. It's designated to feed houses, businesses, and stuff like that. But you will step that down. One of the issues with the H pole out front, the reason that he was probably saying you can't move it, it would require the construction of an underground vault. That's pretty sizable investment. So as you run through there, that's what you get into. Now, burying the lines, my preference is with Commissioner Rowe. I want to see every line stuck underground. I just think it's cleaner. I think it's safer. I think it's more efficient. And I think I don't want to get into the economics of your deal. I would just go from visually appealing and aesthetic value that those wires should be underground. It's much safer, especially ice storms, stuff like that. Ice tends to cling onto those wires. Trees get ice on them, they fall in. You can have a power outage really, really quickly. And if those wires do snap, it's not that pleasant to be around because everybody has to be evacuated. It's in proximity to those loose wires.
I have a follow-on question based upon what the commissioner just stated. And I don't want to interrupt if there's more.
No, go ahead.
So I think it's an interesting point to think about. So we talk in terms of setback distances from properties, but do we have any information about what the easement requirements are for this type of transmission line running behind a property, and if there's encroachment onto the property? I guess now, you know, as we're really kind of talking about it, I'm curious about what the impacts might be even to the lots that are being proposed here. So there's the Highlands development, excuse me, it's not the Highlands, but the development for
Abbey Moore.
Abbey Moore, thank you very much. Well, where these lines are running, by considering a recommendation for approval in terms of zoning, would we be positioned, and I say we as in the town, be positioning themselves for some sort of liability for an encroachment situation for these utility lines and given the considerations for the proximity of the lots?
Let me make sure I understand correctly. So it's a setback question for the future homes, and then there's also a question about perhaps an existing encroachment?
Well, what we don't know is if there truly is encroachment or not,
We don't.
right? We do know, though, that there's defined setbacks, right, that should help with utility easements and things like that, create that separation, right? So I guess I'm pointing to the unknowns that are out there related to where this easement runs and the possibility for encroachment at the properties that are here in Abbey Moore that back up to the property, and also the new homes that are being proposed. So I'm curious to learn more about that perspective. And then secondarily to that, what are the liability issues or not that the town would be imposed upon the town if we made a recommendation for approval and we weren't considering these things? So it's kind of a question to kind of protect, really from the administration standpoint, the town, but also the community as well.
Right. I understand, and that's why I brought some of those points up earlier. You have an easement. We don't have setbacks from easements.
Okay.
So to go a little further, you also have physical characteristics of overhead and underground. Underground, you can build your fence over that line that's buried. If there is an easement running for electrical, cable, anything else, if it's underground, you can put your fence on the other side of it. You can encapsulate that line as it runs through your yard. We have quite a few of those here in town already. We have other developments where, the setbacks on the side, they're to the limit where they can. The easement runs underground. That fence is on, like, if your electrical line is here, that fence will come around it this way. It can be in your yard. It's fine. It's the physical nature. The overhead can't do the same thing. You can't put a physical overhead wire inside. And so it's defined by the easement boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a 30-foot easement, that pole can't extend. The crossarm can't extend more than that 30 feet with the structure appended to it. It's got to be defined inside of the easement as it's required. And it's a co-location. It's a Southwestern Bell, so Encore's putting its wires on Southwestern Bell. Could have been a Southwestern Bell pole. So there are comm lines on that thing, fiber, whatever else run along on that line. And so you have your electrical lines that are appended to probably a Southwestern Bell pole.
So it doesn't appear that there would be an encroachment issue for these overhead lines to the new properties.
Correct. There's a 10-foot easement. That's the Southwestern Bell easement. And then there's a rear yard of 25 feet. So you could not have a structure within 25 feet of that property line.
Yeah,
So there's a 15-foot.
Understand all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just for clarity's purpose, because it was mentioned earlier about how the lines were present when Abbey Moore was built, the easement that Helen Eve referred to, the 10-foot easement, it's completely within the subject property that we're looking at tonight. Like, so obviously, even if this had come up back in 07, 08, or whenever, it would have been a moot point because it would have been on the other property and there would have been no action that you could take on it at that time.
And I'm just thinking through that Encore came in, they made adjustments to the power lines, I guess, to make these more erect, right? So don't know if that imposed any sort of change to what the environment was. So I'm just, again, just trying to kind of think through the different considerations we might have as it relates to the zoning and before we get to the plan development and sort through all that.
Understood. And, they did do a boundary survey for the property and located the easement. I don't believe it's part of, the overhead. If we see something encroach in an easement, the boundary survey usually notes that information. Juan, perhaps you have information on that boundary survey? Are there any encroachments?
No, if you look at the plat clearly shows where we're not at the plat case yet, so I don't want to talk too much about the plat right now. But there's a 10-foot southwestern bell easement. And also, you may know as well, Terry, is that when Encore puts an overhead line, they don't always get easements. But when an overhead line goes up, Encore has a known easement on that power overhead line. So even though you might not physically have an easement on your property, you do have one. Because Encore, when they set those poles, it's known that they have a right to an easement where their poles run, even though you might not have one that's physically written on your property. There is an easement there, based on Encore regulations for their overhead lines.
It's an imputed
Yes,
easement,
yes,
and it's defined again by the voltage in the line.
right. And this one is because, like Terry said,
Of the
this was probably a phone line before, and so it's an old southwestern bell easement that's 10 feet wide. That's how wide they typically are, 10 feet, 10 or 15. They're not any wider than that. When you get to the 100-foot easements, that's when you have your big transmission lines with the big steel posts and stuff like that. This is a typical, overhead line. I live in East Dallas, and so, we have power lines everywhere, everywhere and stuff. And so I have 10-foot, I have easements in my backyard and stuff, so. But as far as encroachments, no, none were noted.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions, comments? You want to have a motion concerning the rezoning item?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the request to rezone to R12.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any other questions, comments, discussion?
I want to make
Vote.
one clarification.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding that from the discussion, that if we approve a change in zoning, then the electric line becomes a moot point. Is that true?
My understanding is that approving the zoning would then render the plat that we're going to hear on the next item as conforming to the new zoning, and thus there is actually no way for us as a body to deny that plat. We can vote against it, but it'll still ultimately become approved.
That's what I was afraid of. Okay.
Is that your understanding? Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's why preliminary plat items usually take about 5 minutes.
And Chairman, you can't table a plat. You have to act on those within 30 days of receipt.
I know, they're always pushing us on these things, you know? Who made that rule?
Austin.
Austin?
Can I say something? Yes. Please state your name, address, please.
Hi, how are you? My name is Hector, and I'm partner of Nate. And what I'm seeing here is the point that they were looking at is rezoning, and just we went out to the next items. And the second thing that I would like to say, if we don't develop anything and we don't do anything as a town, as a community, I mean, the lines will remain there forever for you and for everybody. So I think we need to work together to fix it. I mean, the town, the neighbors of the other side, and I guess we'll talk what we can do, but there is not something that we can do on ourselves. That's it, just for the record. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'll have one more small comment since we have the motion on the floor, and then I'll be done. I'm reminded of when we all, if you guys remember, when we heard the case about the rezoning over by Byron Nelson High School for townhomes. And there was a lot of discussion, and there was actually a lot of good aspects of the proposed development. However, the way the discussion went, it kind of became, well, if you don't approve this, you don't know what might happen there, or it might just sit there. And I actually, even though that was ultimately approved, I didn't support that rezone because I was satisfied to wait and see what might happen that might provide a marginally better outcome than the one they were offering. And as we hear this, even though I don't have any issue at all with the density, and I'm sure that the build quality and everything that would come along with it, I'm a fan of our straight zoning districts. No secret to that. I mean, I live in one of them. I live in R12. So somebody wants to come do an R12 development, I'm all for it. I like my neighborhood. But I also am cognizant of the fact that if this were to be developed as a continuous 8.8 acres, we'd be in a different situation, and the power lines might be getting buried, which would provide a clearer path to an outcome I'd be more likely to want to see. So that's kind of how I view it. It reminds me a little bit of those old ones that we heard a year or two ago.
Do you need to close the public hearing?
Yes. We need to close the public hearing.
Or, well, we have a motion on the floor, so.
8:05 PM. Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Ketcherton and a second from Mr. Stevens, Commissioner Stevens. Okay, no other discussion or comments? Call for the vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, 5-2.
Can I request a bio break?
Yes. 5-minute break.
At 8:06.
8:06.
I'll just put it R15. They don't have to say anything. That's what I'll move the lot line.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. We can I get the economics.
Well, this guy actually tried to buy the
Which they're not. Secondary power lines that you're not, those are up.
You understand where I'm at?
But those are not.
Not easy to deal with. So that's what frightens me.
Not total, they're not.
And we actually told him, we subliminally told him, drop one line, your nails were don't. He never picked up.
Put a condition that you have to. Such a mess. Right, and that's not part of.
Came up today. Training the boards on how to open meetings. Seriously, I've been in town meetings all afternoon. And 4 times it came up that, and then the answer is, no one's ever trained anybody. Right. On having.
Like I forgot to close the first part.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, I heard you. I heard you.
I heard you.
Experience is the best training, but we can't have everybody be, I mean, and this is a pretty experienced board, we can't have everybody always be experienced across the board. There ought to be a template. I mean, I sat by Nick all the time, and I watched you do P&Z, and I just always do a hybrid way, I'll say, and kind of would follow along.
Subdivision regulations, I mean, I track that.
Very strictly.
First we tried that many years ago, they were forcing.
I don't agree with that. So I have.
I know all about that. I've been probably older than you are. So, I've heard all of it. Stacy Road in Allen, and I'm very familiar with it. But I'd prefer to talk to the town attorney.
Yes, and it went step by step by step by step.
That's out of
I read the ordinance.
See, I thought it was a little that he had tweaked. Somebody told me that he has this for all of his internal meetings and stuff like that.
He may do
Right,
that.
and then it would say,
Right,
you close
except for-
here, you make this statement. And it's like, man, if I could read that.
Sure.
I understand, but if the rules say you're supposed to follow Robert's
passes.
order, would say you have to have a motion first before you have to approve the plat.
But we all,
Agree with that.
no, we've never done, and actually Nick never did that either. We always would discuss.
Then we have a
questions.
motion, then we have more discussion.
Alicia
like to do that, because that's Article 2 vote. But that sways your conversation.
Yeah, I like to have it. And the
Yeah,
other
I
thing
didn't
we
think
did
power line
is, and maybe the rules and procedures just need to be tweaked to say things like this, because I like to, like Michael said, item, discussion, Q&A, anybody who wants to talk public can talk. Motion to the floor, more discussion, and then we
we also used to, when Nick was mayor, we would make sure that the public would have an opportunity to speak when the motion was on the floor. Because sometimes people.
That's in the rules.
Yeah.
A little rebuttal time.
Right, yeah.
You should be doing.
Right.
You know,
Right. There's been a few times.
runs their meeting
Yeah.
differently, and we don't force it. And the lawyer said, you know, you know, we're not gonna do that unless until you stray out of the realm.
I just think more discussion. Shall we continue with the meeting?
Yes.
Something that gets said.
We're back in order now. Okay, question, item number 2, which was the rezoning, that failed in the vote.
Yeah, you have to deny the plat because it doesn't meet.
Right, that was my question. Because the plat then is,
Based on R12.
right, R12, and it's an R15
Correct.
scenario. We haven't changed the zone yet. So the plat is moot at this particular point in time.
No, sir, it's on the agenda, so you still need to take action.
Right, I knew that.
Okay.
But there's really no need for a discussion, is there? Like a long discussion and presentation, it's a matter of a motion to deny the preliminary plat.
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a second?
We should probably, you want to introduce you have to introduce the item?
Yeah, I probably do.
Yeah.
For the record. Okay, item 3 on the agenda. Preliminary plat. It's case number PP 23001, Triple Crown Estates preliminary plat. Consider and possibly act on a recommendation of the Trophy Club Town Council on a request for a preliminary plat for lots 1 through 6 and 7X Block A, Triple Crown Estates, consisting of 2.992 acres of land out of the Mary Medlin Survey Abstract Number 832, located south of Trophy Park Drive, east of Nottingham Court, and west of Churchill Downs Lane, within Denton County Trophy Club, Texas. Okay, that's the item.
I'll make a motion to deny the plat for case PP 23-001, Triple Crown Estates preliminary plat. Motion to deny.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Do we have any discussion, comments? None? Call the point. All in favor? All opposed? Abstentions? 1. Okay. Next item is the approval of the minutes for the July 6th Planning and Zoning Commission. Has everyone had a chance to review these? And any comments, questions, changes? No changes? Do we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Staff update.
All right, good evening. The only update is we won't have P and Z next month. We don't have anything coming up.
Well, I'm going to take it right off the calendar.
What's that?
No P and Z next month,
Yeah.
so I'm taking it.
Oh, well, yeah, that's for, yeah, we're gonna amend the zoning, that's a zoning ordinance. We need to add, staff found where we don't have, it's for small cell. They've updated the fees, the state's come up with some different things on, and so I'm not actually writing the ordinance. Another staff member is, Tamara, assistant to the town manager. But that will come to y'all just for approval of the ordinance and schedule, the fee schedule.
Just on our next, whenever our next meeting is, we'll probably October, assuming there is something.
September, we will have one. in
Okay, but it'll
September,
just be
yes.
that?
No,
Wait, we're in August, right?
Yes.
We won't have
August.
one in September, it'll be October.
Okay,
yes.
okay, that's what I was.
well, September, we'll have the small cell nodes. And that's probably it. For October, 1H and 1HB, townhomes, final plat. That's, if it goes as what they're planning, that will be coming. So that's really the only update I've got.
Have we heard anything more for the charging stations?
No.
That group wanted to put in?
No, we never heard back from them.
Okay, probably best.
So did you confirm we're having or not having September for that small?
We are having one, because we need to get
In
that, we need
September.
to get that to council so they can approve that. Because there's quite a few of those little small cell towers and nodes in town, and we can't collect any of those fees until we get this going.
Is
So,
this for 5G connectivity?
yes.
Will that be September 7th?
Yes, yes. Yes.
How many of those are around? And so you're essentially saying there's some sort of revenue, more or less, it's a revenue generation source for the town?
Yes, and what we've done in the past, and this is just, Alicia and I and a couple other staff members kind of looked, it only appears that we were charging a fee right off, just like when they would come and then install, and realizing that you can do like a 5-year, and it's an annual fee, and then if they add something to that, then you can increase that. So it's a revenue stream for us.
And
Small, but
does this fall under the category that I recall there was state legislation to actually prevent you from charging a franchise fee or something along those lines?
well, they limit on, they actually say this is what you can charge for these.
Right, so it's tightened up from the
Yes.
state level, whereas some of the other things, the
There were
older
some
technologies.
cities,
they're
I
a
think
little
what
more
happened
wide
is there were some cities trying to gouge.
open. Right,
So-
yeah, okay. So this is sort of in line with more or less what state,
And I think when we
Regulations are.
got that memo from the state saying that, then that's when we started looking into
Yeah.
it and realizing that we actually aren't charging.
How long has that been going on for, Matt, approximately?
What?
Not charging, what you all could have? So you said there was basically kind of the initial charges for the installation, but then there's kind of almost, you agree to 3, 5 years, whatever that time period may be, where there's
Yeah,
payments
I
being
don't,
made. Okay.
predates me.
And where I was going with that is your opportunity for back payments.
No, there's
That's
not.
unfortunate. Okay.
Can we designate the funds to bury the power line area?
Too soon.
thanks, Matt.
Okay.
That's all you have? Okay. How about a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? I didn't think so. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
I don't really want to sell this guy's factory for you.
No,
It's a nice hot
they're nice, beautiful.